Hello, all. In continuation to the series where we are talking about what's new in Business Central 2023 release wave 2, let's talk about one of the interesting feature which makes life so much simpler, at least for our consultants, for debugging Business Central environments. Now, it simplifies and speed up your debugging journey. Now, I have heard so many questions and I've tried answering all those questions to kind of explain how debugging is done in Business Central. And to be very frank, before this version, it was a little bit hard and tricky. There are different kind of debugging based on what kind of environment you are working on. If you are on production, you can only use snapshot debugging, and then people get confused between normal debugging and snapshot debugging, and it takes a while to understand what are different kind of configurations that we can create in our VS Code. So in this video, we'll try to understand how it is simplified and how it makes life easier. And during this video, if I use a word which is still confusing, just let me know into the comment section. You all know that I read all my comments religiously, and I'll make sure that we cover that topic in detail if needed. Okay. So without wasting further time, let's start talking about it. So recreating your or creating your VS Code environment for debugging was a nightmare, as I said earlier, and sometimes it was very hard for consultants who majority of the time do debugging of processes with customer. It was very hard to understand what is allowed, what is not allowed, what are different properties in the configuration, and how we need to set this up. So it was very hard for people to utilize it. Now Microsoft had made it very simple by just accessing a action or a button on our Business Central client. So let's try this feature and let me know if how you like it. Okay. So let's say if I'm sitting on a vendor entity and customer is reporting an issue into it, and I'm a consultant and I want to debug this scenario. Okay. And right now I'm sitting on a sandbox, but I might be sitting on a production. So the feature or the enhancement works on the sandbox as well as on production environment. So let's be very clear. What I do is I go into my help and support icon action and choose inspect page and data. Our favorite friend, inspect page and data. There's a lot into it, so don't just ignore it. If you pay attention to this, you will see that there is a new URL added called explore page in VS Code. Now the tooltip there says specifies the URL that open this page in VS Code and attach debugger to the current session. So what will happen, and I'm just assuming it at this point by reading the detail, is it will automatically connect my VS Code to this environment and also to this particular user session. So if I'm a user and I'm on this page and I want to debug with the help of a consultant or with a super user to debug the scenario that I'm facing issue, I can actually click on this button and it should do certain things for me. So let's see what happens when we do that. So if the Visual Studio Code, as an yes, you need Visual Studio Code to be installed on your machine. But if Visual Studio Code is already open, then it'll either choose the existing environment, it'll ask you, or it'll ask you to create a new Visual Studio project. If the AL language extension is not installed, user will be asked to install it. And I'm hoping if you're working on Business Central, you will have VS Code and AL language extension installed. Uh, the so let's click on it. Let's not waste time. So as soon as we click on it, let's see what happens. And it's happening on my other screen, but this is the message that I'm getting. It says AL language extension for Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central wants to open a URL, which is VS Code, and then this is the URL or the path for your AL extension, and then there is a number 12786. And let's click open. When I click open on my VS Code, what I can see here, and let me show you here, it says, do you want to use the current project that you are in right now, or do you want to create a new project? If your VS Code is not open, it'll automatically create a new project. But let's hit on create a new project. As soon as I do this, you'll notice that it is doing a lot of things, and we'll look at it once it is done with it. It generated an app.json, it generated a launch.json, surprisingly. I see a message, symbols are missing, but technically speaking, it is actually downloading some symbols automatically, and I can notice it here. We'll understand how all this magic is working. Okay. So this is done, it seems, and let's zoom this in. So let's understand what it did from beginning. So to begin with, it created a new app.json, which is the file which provides you information about this extension. And you give it gave it a name of, and there was an option. I'll click on it again. Sorry. It gave it a name called generated project 1, and the publisher is default publisher because it doesn't know what company I belong to, which makes sense. The version and other properties, but additionally it also said it dependent on two areas or two additional extension, which I did not tell it to have a dependency on it. And then it says that it is related to version 23 and these are the ID range. Then interestingly, it also created a launch.json with 3 configurations. The first one is to attach to a debugging session. Now, an attach is something that you can only use in your sandbox environment. This is something that you cannot use in your production environment. So we don't have a production environment, but I'm hoping that it is built in a way that if you're trying to connect from a production environment, this configuration may not be generated. Hoping, let's see once this is available. The second configuration that it created is for snapshot requests, because a snapshot debugging you can do on sandbox and production. And third, it created a configuration to download the symbols, which it did automatically. In this one, it set the environment name and environment type. Same, these properties are here and here. But other than that, it set up what the break on next properties is, and it also set up a unique property called session ID. That I'm trying to debug or snapshot debug a session which is tagged at 84052. And this is exactly the session which I'm utilizing. So if I go into my help and support, go down here, I'll notice here that I have a session ID of 84052, which is automatically set up in my launch.json. And as you notice, it also downloaded symbol. But let's talk about one more thing which we skipped, that how system decided that I need these dependency. So the way Microsoft built this, which is pretty good, is they went into the page inspection and see what are the extension on this page. And because system comes up by default based on other properties, it also see that there was a DOIT localization for Mexico and GB historical data. And by understanding that, it was smart enough to add those dependencies automatically. But as I said, I missed one point. So let's go back and let's click on customer and try to explore this page into VS Code. Okay, the same one. Let's click OK. And do you want to download latest symbol? Okay, let me close this. Maybe then it'll pop up a new project. I don't want to utilize the existing project. So when I do that and open this, again the question, and let's create a new project. Now when I create a new project, it will create a new project with generated project 2 name this time, because there is already a generated project 1. So it is smart enough. But now if you look at dependencies, there are a little bit different dependencies than I had in the past. Because now it says that I also have a AL project 3 dependency and a dynamic GP historical data. Now that is again coming based on what you see on your page inspection. All the dependencies which are listed there are also added in your app.json. Right now, it is trying to download the symbol, And then it'll also try to open the source code of the object from where I clicked on open in VS Code or explore page in VS Code. Now remember this, you will only be able to see the page code if you are allowed to access that page. If the partner who built that page or ISV partner or Microsoft have allowed you to access the source code of that page or object. Now, once the symbol of that object is loaded, you can either choose snapshot debugging, irregular debugging, or a non-debugging that I was just playing around. So if you choose the snapshot debugging, it'll start the snapshot session and you can follow the steps as you do. If you don't know about it, let me know in the comment section and we'll talk about snapshot debugging. Then the regular debugging is you set up a breakpoint and it kind of breaks at that point. And none means I'm doing nothing. So this makes your life easier as a consultant and also for the developers to understand how you set all these parameters for different kind of configuration that are needed for different kind of debugging. And the Visual Studio Code is automatically populated based on the right setting when you click on a particular action. Now is that it? No. So hold on. There's an extension to it. Or not an extension, because extension is a confusing word these days. But if I'm trying to understand what this field does, and if this field is allowed to be accessed by the partner who built this field or added this field into this table, I can actually click on that and then say explore field in VS Code. So not the page, I'm trying to explore this field in VS Code. When I click on that, it again follows the same rules as it did earlier. And let's this time use the current project. Now what we'll do, it'll try to, do you want to download the little symbol? No, I just downloaded it, so I don't want it. It'll automatically take you to that field and the source code of that field from where you did an explore in VS Code. So it is not just taking you to that object. If you are confused what would be the source code on the validate of name field, you can just click on it from here, and if the source code is allowed to be read by you as a partner or as a customer, you can actually navigate to that code. Majority of Microsoft code is open source, so you should be able to see all the code. Or not majority, I think at this moment, and I can be wrong, every code from Microsoft for Business Central is publicly available or open source. So from Microsoft perspective, you can click on any field and follow the rules and it'll take you to that code directly. If you're doing it on page, you can do that there. If you want a detail at a field level, you can do it from there. Hopefully that makes sense. If that's it, there's one more thing. Sorry. Which is currently not working, but I'm hoping that that gets fixed till GA. In your help and support, let's go in there. There's a new option added called attach debugger to this session. Now, this as of this moment, and I'll click on it. Okay, it seems to be working. Let me see. I might close this. Okay, let's see. Attach debugger to this session. Okay, it is trying to open my VS Code. It did. Open, create a new project, and now I'm just debugging that session. I'm not connected to a page. Did not start it from page, and it created a app.json for me as it created last time. It also created a launch.json for me with the session ID and all the similar profiles as it created, but this time it did not start or showed me a page or the source code of the page, because my context is from help and support where I just click the button to attach a debugger to this session. Now once the symbol download is over, it should ask me the same question, which kind of debugging I want to start. So it will automatically ask me which kind of debugging I want to start, and as soon as I click on it, it'll get into a debugging mode. So There's a lot that has been added into this release just to help our consultants and developers to make their life simpler when they are dealing with the debugging scenarios. Now, so let's do a quick recap before we end this so that we remember it. In the Visual Studio Code, when you go into your client on a page, you have two options. One, you can explore that page in VS Code by clicking just on a URL. The prerequisite for it is Visual Studio Code should be installed and the AL language is installed. And if AL language is not installed, it'll ask you to install that, the AL language extension for VS Code. Once all that prerequisites are in place, if you are clicking on that action from a page level, it'll open the symbol of that page for you and you can then choose which kind of debugging you want to do. If you are confused about the source code that is associated to a field, and as I said earlier, if you have permission to see that code from the partner who built it, you can just access the field area in page inspection and choose that you want to see or explore that field in VS Code, and the same process will repeat and it will generate or take you directly to that source code. Third, in the help and support, you can attach a debugger to a session, which you can do from other places also, but this time the context is not that page from where you are coming from. You can do it from, you can just do a generic debugging process. You can either choose to do a snapshot debugging or you can either choose doing a regular debugging of your instance. And then it'll just execute the debugging process. But just remember, as far as the access to the source code, that will be defined based on the resource exposure policy or profile for the extension that where it is coming for. If there are different extensions that are attached to your object, which typically is a page, then that page will also pop up. Those dependencies will also be defined in your app.json. Hopefully that makes sense. If it does, do hit the like button. If you have questions that what is a snapshot debugging, what is normal debugging, what is the difference between both of those, add that into the comments and we'll surely talk about it in future. If you think other developers and consultants should learn about it, hit the share button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button and I'll see you sooner than later with the next feature in Business Central 2023 Release Wave 2. Have a nice day.